Hi, everybody. This is Kat Day, and I'm here with SPM Media, and we have Calvin Post of CJ Billiards and Garrett Troop from SPM Sneaky P Mafia. Anyhow, take it away, Garrett.
Hi, Calvin. How you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
We're doing good. We're doing good. So, anybody that's been watching Facebook at all or watching the billiard industry has seen you come out with a lot of innovations over the last few years that you make on your 3D printer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and where you started from?
All right. So I started CJP Billiards back in the beginning of the pandemic, right when the lockdown started to happen. I had a 3D printer, and I'd always been interested in 3D printing because I saw a lot of people making things from movies and TV shows that were like from Star Wars or other high quality props. And I thought, man, if they can make these with a machine and some, CAD files, I'd love to try my take at it as well. So I kind of
Right.
started just for fun to do that. And then I also inherited my grandfather's pool table at my first house. And I wanted to start building like chalk holders and other things for the table because I just was like, I have this machine, I can build things. Maybe I can start creating some items. So the first one I made was a magnetic chalk holder for square, and I just put a piece of master's chalk in there, and then buddies would come over and play at the pool table and go, "Oh, how's like the chalk, floating off your pocket?" And then I would take it out to like pool halls and bars, and people actually wanted to buy them. So I sold the very beginning designs, started producing it and selling it to people, and then I brought it online to Facebook Marketplace, and then it kind of snowballed from there, where people were buying it, and I developed a lot of other products and began to think of how I could actually improve the game of billiards in terms of unique designs or helping those that are handicapped or donating to people that are just starting out. I kind of wanted to build pool up with new items and I guess freshen up a market that was kind of stale. There's not really a lot of new accessories out there. We're using the same bridge heads, the same cue balls, the same tips. Everyone's pretty much locked in their ways, and I kind of wanted to shake things up a little bit.
Right. Now, I remember in the beginning, when you started coming out with different things, that you started focusing on people that are in wheelchairs or people that are handicapped. What is your take on that, or why did you do that?
Um, I've always wanted to make pool accessible to those that cannot. And the first person that ever reached
Right.
out to me was a vet from Afghanistan who had been in a IED explosion with his Hummer, and he lost part of his hand in that, and he loved playing pool, and that was his bridge hand. So he lost, the first couple inches on his fingers, and then his thumb had
Right.
an injury on it as well. So I wanted to build him something that he could either play one-handed by just putting something like on the cue, or something that he could hold in his hand that could produce a stable bridge.
Right.
And I started to post those images online that I was just helping out a vet and doing that. And it was like 20, 30 people messaged me, sending me pictures of their hand. Can you build me something for this? Can you do something for that? And I
Right.
thought there's a whole group of vets, people with disabilities that can't properly play pool because no one's thinking about them.
Right.
And it became not for the money for me. It just became so exciting when someone with a disability would be in a wheelchair or have, something wrong with their arm or their hand, and they'd reach out to me and say, "Look at me run this table with your item." And I was like, I don't even want to charge people for
Oh,
this because
yeah.
it's just a feel good thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Now, what was your first couple of items other than your bridgeheads?
Other than the bridgeheads, the chalk holder was the very first. And then I did branch out into the bridgeheads next and kind of experimented with that. The ghost ball training ring, which is a template tool you can use to see where the point of impact would be, was one of my next big hits.
Yep.
And then it's really just been a trial and error of like cue claws, and all sorts of other items. I mean, you can't go out into the market and not have everything be a success. I mean, sometimes you're going to have a failure, an item that just doesn't work. But if you don't try, you're never going to know what actually is really good, what people want to buy, and also what can really help
Right.
people. So sometimes
Right.
people look at my idea like the toadstool tip. I get so many messages, that thing's stupid. Who wants to shoot with a giant 40 millimeter tip? Well, if I use the toadstool tip and it gets a young kid to play pool more because he's hitting the center of the cue ball, then that's totally impactful to me because now his engagement is there. And if he's actually having fun or if she's having fun, you're going to have that kid potentially want to play pool as they grow up and get more motor skills.
Mhm.
So every
Right.
time someone says that thing looks stupid, I go, that's cool. Because you know what? I have 40 other messages from people saying that their kid loves to play pool now based just off of the toadstool tip.
Right.
So
You have two of those sizes. Yeah. You have a bigger one and a smaller one.
I have a 40 millimeter and a 20 millimeter. And then I also break down to a slide on tip that has a leather piece on it as well. So you can kind of go through like 3 different stages until the youth player is ready to just shoot with the normal playing cue, like a 13 millimeter or 12.5. It's all to be like training wheels on a bike. That way,
Right.
it kind of gradually goes down, because you don't want them to rip the table or damage it or just be hitting with unintentional spin all the time, because then they're just not going to
Right
hit
now,
any
what are
balls
you
into the
using?
pockets.
What are you using for the material? Because I remember when I first got the toadstool, it was kind of almost like a rubbery type of material.
So it's a flexible 3D printed material called TPU, which is
Mhm.
like a polyurethane mix. It
Yeah.
prints very much like a normal plastic. You don't really have to treat it much differently depending on which material you use. But there are so many TPUs on the market. I probably have 30 to 40 rolls down there that I use just to figure out which toadstool tip material would be the most resilient and also kind of have a good quote unquote
Right.
hit to it, because there's
Right.
so many of them that are more bouncy or softer, just like on a softness
Right.
scale. So
Now,
like for my
do you
pocket
put chalk on
reducers,
those too?
you can put chalk on it if you want on the toadstool tip.
Yeah.
It doesn't really help though, because it's really just to act like a paddle.
Right. Right.
It's kind of just a push, not really do anything else besides that.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's cool. What are you working on next? Like, where are you trying to get to?
I mean, right now, a lot of the efforts are just focused on production, because I've been picking up a lot of new partners and wholesale clients for my existing items. So a day-to-day basis is I go work a 10-hour day as a welder. I come home, I start prints, I work on Vulcan tips, and then I'm consistently just trying to keep up with the website orders and the wholesale orders, which is eating up a lot of my time for being creative, honestly, which is why I haven't been posting a lot of new things.
Yeah.
But I do want to do a line of holders that have stronger magnets in them, even stronger than I have now, because that's been successful. I want to do like a belt clip or a better pocket puck. So I want to try to maybe do I guess it would be version 4 of the chalk holders at this point, which I have some drawings made,
Okay.
just to try to make them a little bit more stable. I'm always
Okay.
trying to improve every design, because I get tons of feedback in from people.
Right.
And then I'm working a lot with the curve aiming system, and I want to do a PBIA certification once I
Okay.
have my house this summer. So that's kind of
Okay.
where I'd like to go, is be more of a teacher.
Yeah. Do you see you eventually taking over your 9 to 5?
I'd like it to if I could. I mean, if there's the demand for it, and if I were to be able to, I guess, make enough monthly income. Ideally, I'd love to have like an actual brick and mortar like office per se, with a couple pool tables in it, maybe sell cues and other equipment, and then run
Okay.
CJP Billiards in the background
Okay.
of that
Okay.
shop. So that I would love to have it be like an 8-hour, a day shop.
Yeah. 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 Now, you mentioned you're doing the Volcar tips. Why don't you tell me about those?
So the Vulcan tips, they come back from the story of how hustlers used to travel from day to day. Back, before phones, technology, you would go from one town to the next, be an unknown player. You try to, go in with a sneaky Pete or take a house cue. And these traveling players would go look for a single layer tip, was what was popular back then, before all the layer tips came out. And you would go find a house cue that had one that was used but not abused, because that used section of it at the top would be compressed. So it would play better than a normal brand new tip or a worn out tip. So they popped that off, that compressed tip, and put it on their cue. And from there, people went and sought out these compressed tips that had been played just a little bit, but not too much.
Right.
And that's kind of the history behind where a single layer tip is, I guess, would be preferable to a layered tip, is that if it's been compressed, it already has been work hardened, and that work hardened allows it to be durable and play a certain way. So with the
Right.
Vulcan tip,
Now, do you find that you have mushroom occurring?
no mushrooming occurs with the Vulcan tip at all. Once you install it, there's no mushrooming and there's little to no glazing. And that's what's really important. And that's why a lot of people sought out a compressed tip back in the day.
So,
And
when you're saying compressed, I know that there is a durometer, I believe the machine is called, and what it does is it tests the hardness of a tip, and then it has associated with a number. Now, I know that Elkmaster is one of the softest tips out there, with a few others that are non-layered, and then they get progressively harder with different types of tips until you get to the phenolic range or G10 range.
Yeah.
Where do your fall in the soft to hard range?
So what's interesting is that a lot of people on the market think that durability comes from hardness, and the two don't necessarily go hand in hand, which is something I figured out from a lot of testing.
Okay.
So an Elk Master tip when it comes out of the box is at 60,
Okay.
and once they go through the process of either being put in milk or being put in casein, that's what the Vulcan tips are put in, casein with some other proteins to help with expansion of the tip, because you're soaking it in that milk or that gel that I'm creating. And
Yep.
once they expand, you then put them in a tip vise and press them back down. Now that's where it gets important, because the compression is what creates the durability of the tip, not necessarily how hard it is. It's a prolonged compression that kind of, I guess, would
Does it
mimic,
one
and
equal the other? I mean, doesn't the longer you compress it, doesn't that make it harder?
not necessarily. It matters about how hard you compress it, not actually the longevity. So for instance, if you put it
If you put
with,
20 pounds of pressure on it, it's going to be softer than 30 pounds of pressure.
yeah, and how long you compress it does matter, but it's more of how much pressure you put on it generates the hardness more. So I do
Okay.
my tips for 24 hours and I put a little bit of pressure on them, just enough where it feels like snug in the vise. And it doesn't really take that much of the height of the tip down from when it was actually soaked. That way it plays as a
Okay.
taller tip with more life. And once they go on the Durometer again, it has a 60 shore D, just like it did when it started. I've done 65, I've done 70, I've even got them to 75. But then I feel like 60 was what played the best for me, and that's what a lot of
Okay.
my customers like as well. So that's kind of the original formula. But if someone has a specific hardness request, I can do harder tip.
Now, 60 is on the way softer side. So how do you get a soft tip that has a compressed outer section to it, I guess you'd say?
Well,
The
it's
whole tip
more,
is,
the whole tip
yeah.
is compressed, so the whole tip reads at about 60.
Okay.
And once you actually start playing with it, it does have that break-in period again. And once you play with it for, I'd say, about 20, 30 hours, and you put the Durometer on when it's on the cue, it'll be about 65, 66. So it does harden up a little bit, but
Yeah.
not much.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But it doesn't mushroom or glaze, which is huge.
Yeah. 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 Now, how do you feel about the evolution of layered tips and you going back to a single layered tip?
I mean, a layered tip in essence is just like some of these cues you see that are spliced with different woods to create a kind of, like pie shaped section or whatnot. It's to create every single tip to be exactly the same. So every time you get, let's say, a Kamui or a tiger tip, that tip is probably going to play pretty close to how the tip did the last time that you had
Right.
it. So from tip to tip, there's more consistency and there's more quality because they're being very, very picky with which leather they put and stack and glue together to make that tip. So
Right.
anyone that plays the layer tip, I understand why you do it. If you like that hit, then that's totally fine. I like the single layer tip because once it's actually gone through a soak process and compression, it is a very, very good tip. And I feel like it's more durable being one piece, but also there's a lot of quality control that goes into making a very good single layer tip. And there's a reason why a lot of people make a poor milk dud or a poor dud style tip. It's because they don't go through and do their due diligence and actually really do trial and error to build a great tip.
Right. Right. Yep. I understand that. Now, do you have any plans on making a break tip of sorts? And in addition to the playing tip?
There is some work for that. I mean, I'm not, if I do, it's gonna be out of leather because most of the phenolic and G10 tips those are pretty hard to just beat. They're just the material is the material. You can't really do much else to them. But I know people like the white diamond tip or things like that. And I know the Pro is a pretty hard tip, and I've been experimenting with.
What is it? The white diamond is the one that has what is it? A harder outside. I think it's phenolic on the outside and then leather on the inside. Is that right?
Not 100% sure as I haven't used them, but I just know that's one of the tips that people rave about as having more of a leather house cue break style feel, but generating more power and speed to the cue ball.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm more of a phenolic or G10 style player because I can
Yeah.
control the cue ball better with that. So for right now, there's no, I guess, definitive plan for, I guess, a break tip, but I do want to try to produce other single layer tips with other brands as the base, like a Water Buffalo or a La Pro, or I've even done triangle, but the triangles come up pretty hard. Like the triangle, when it goes through the process, could probably be a break tip. It's that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I've seen 3D printed break tips before. How do you feel about those?
I mean, I've tried 3D printed tips out of a variety of different materials,
Yep.
PLA, ABS, PETG. I mean, every time that something's 3D printed, it runs the risk of impact and shocks because it's a layer based way to build. So it's got a layer on a layer on a layer on a layer on a layer. It's not like injection molding where it's one piece that's been bent or conformed to a shape. So I never decided to run with any 3D printed tips because they just don't last. They just wear out because of that layer based additive to it. So
Right.
I don't think it's the future for that. I mean, I have seen people do 3D printed full cubes, and that's kind of
Really?
interesting. Yeah.
A full cube. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What is the base of the shaft then?
Everything's plastic all the way through. They put a weight bolt in it, and they put a metal screw for the threads. And the
Wow.
entire thing is made out of plastic. And there's even like carbon fiber PLA you can use, which is depending on the blend and what you want to do. You can have it do where it's like 30 or 40% carbon in there, and then the rest is plastic. They don't play that great, to be honest. I've seen them and I've seen all the reviews on them, but it's just interesting. Someone can build their own cube if they have a tall enough machine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. So where do you see your company going in, like, say, after you get your house built? Because I know that was a thing that we had spoken about before we had started here, that you're having a house built and you're going to have a lot more space to use your 3D printers in that space.
Yeah. We're probably going to do an upgrade on a few of the machines. I have some old TiVo Tornado machines, which are a foot by foot build surface, and the quality on the machines isn't what I'd like. They're the machines I started with, but I've also explored like newer machines that are the same size that print at either faster or a better quality, sometimes both.
Right.
So I'd
Right.
like to upgrade the fleet of machines, maybe have 6 to 7 really expensive machines, like $500 machines. That way I can keep with orders a lot better. And I really want to do a lot of YouTube tutorials on the new pool table and talk about the curve aiming system a lot more. And I guess just potentially kind of grow organically like I have been doing, because I never really set out to do a plan. I just kind of wake up and do what inspires me. And I try to talk with
Right.
people in the industry that also are like-minded, and things just kind of snowball and build on their own. That's how I've always been.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a small commercial break from one of our sponsors here at Fort Worth Billiards. And then as soon as we get back, we'll get this interview wrapped up. All right.
All righty.
Thank you, Fort Worth Billiards, for helping us stream here. So you'd spoken about the origins of tips and how they kind of came to be, and how the old school hustlers were trying to get a specific feel. What feel are you trying to emulate with your Vulcan tips, other than the specific compression?
I mean, what you look for in a good tip is one that provides feedback when you play. I know a lot of people like the super soft tips, which feels like you put an actual like tiny marshmallow on your tip, and they like that softer hit, especially with like the carbon fiber shafts. But I've always been more of a fan of the stiff hit that a hard tip provides.
Yeah.
So while the Vulcan tip reads in at between 60 to 65, depending on once it settles in,
Right.
it feels like a medium or a hard tip, but it grips the ball like a soft. So it's kind of this unique feel and phenomenon that I think only a layered tip that's been compressed can offer. And if anyone's been wanting to try something like that, there's a lot of good compressed tips on the market. I'm not the only one. I didn't invent it. I didn't pioneer it. I just tried to take my own, take at it, and was successful with it. So I sold over around 1,000 Vulcan tips right now, and they come with an installer's warranty. So anybody that let's say you're a billiard store or a Q Smith and you find like a small fracture in the tip that I missed, or you find any type of flaw while installing it, you just say, hey man, like a tip didn't, install correctly. Can I have another one? And I no questions asked, send it out for that warranty. So it's only for installers. It's not for people that, go put them on by hand and do a botched job. But if it's somebody that's actually credible and they say, hey man, I've installed 20 of your tips and one of them blew apart on the lathe. I don't know what happened. Yeah, you get another one. Like, you spent the money, you deserve it to work. And out of the
Yeah.
1,000 tips I've sold, I've only had 2 ever have an issue. So
Wow. That's not a bad return for
no,
yeah.
I have 6 layers of quality control on it, where I really take a long time to make sure every tip that's leaving leaves in the best possible shape it can.
Right. So for when you start the process of creating the compressed tip, how long does it take you from beginning to end?
So it takes 24 hours to soak in the casein and protein blend. I keep the other half of the blend secret because that's what helps the tips expand. If you just put casein in, they don't expand as tall as my Vulcan tips do. And then after 24 hours soaking, they go through a 48-hour drying process. And that's the very first time I'll see if any tips have failed. If they expand and they can't handle the expansion, they'll develop a crack in them. Anything with a crack gets pitched. So after 48 hours, we start to put the first good tips that have no cracks visible on them in the vise. And when they go on the vise, they go in for 24 hours. And then I pull them out and they go through an inspection again. And sometimes you find cracked tips in the vise that couldn't handle the compression, so you throw those out. Then they sit for another 24 hours after they've gone through the process. And I make sure that the shock of that compression hasn't created any tears, fractures, or anything weird in the tip then. So it's really, it takes me probably about 4 or 5 days to have one Vulcan tip go through the whole process of creation and quality control.
Right. Well, that's
But I
pretty
mean,
cool.
you're doing a lot of chemistry here with it, and a lot of changing and adding things, because the tip is a blue elk master, but when it installs on a cue, it's white. So it's got that white look to it that all my tips have. And that's just from the casein and protein soaking into the leather and actually changing the structure of it.
Right. So you mentioned before that you have a handful of retailers that you work with, and also wholesalers. Where do you want to get with all your stuff? I mean, I'd asked you the question earlier where you want to be, and you said you want to take this over as working an 8-hour day. But are you looking for more clientele right now?
Yeah, I'm always looking for bigger shops. I mean, especially once I get into my house and I have the full production capabilities back, things will become a lot easier to, satisfy pool halls and larger websites. I'd love to get onto some of the, more mainstream pages, like Q-Sticks or Saberts, because Saberts is local here in Michigan, and then there's Bulldog and Billiard Warehouse. I'd love to be able to get some of my products there and still offer my
Yeah.
lifetime warranty through them. That's
Right.
kind of like my dream for that, is to just have some larger retailers kind of come and take me under their wing and just want to work with me.
Right. Have you approached any of them before?
Right now, since I'm in limited production, I haven't really been doing a lot of client acquisition. But it's funny is the amount of people that have reached out to me wanting to work with me since I'm in limited production has actually been like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times larger than the last 2 years. This is my 3rd year doing CJP Billiards, and I've always felt that, or heard that in the 3rd year of business is when you kind of take off and you can figure out if this is going to work or not, because your name is out there, your product is established, or you're just growing in the right direction. And now I have a lot of small time shops that are in like local areas in different states that sell my items on a consistent basis. So
Right. Well, that's good. So where do you see this going in, say, the next 5 years? How long of a long-term projection do you have for this?
see, that's kind of the thing, is I started with absolutely no idea that I even turned this into like a side hustle or a part-time job, in the evenings. So I can't really say what it'll be in 5 years, because I don't even know what it's going to be tomorrow. But
Yeah.
it's just really interesting to just kind of grow as good opportunities reach out to me, or I create them for myself.
Right.
And, I feel like it's always important to do what you like to do, because then you do it best. So for
Right.
me, it's all about just not really worrying about how do I create this into something larger than it is. It's more about just doing the thing I love. And if it turns into something larger, then that's what it's going to turn into.
Right. Yeah, that's a good business model. It is.
Because the passion shows to my customers, when they message me with a broken holder and I say, oh, not a problem, new one going out tomorrow, here's the
Yeah.
tracking number, and I send it to them. It's like, I care about my customers more than I care about a profit. That's how I've always been.
Right.
I did this because I wanted to make the game of billiards or pool better. I didn't do it because I wanted to be rich or have this be a job. But it's funny that when you pour your heart and soul into something, and it's something that you're passionate about doing, it can kind of just naturally grow into something bigger than you thought it would ever be.
Right.
So I get that same question all the time. Where do you see this going? I just see it as something fun I do. And I get excited every time I see an order come across on my phone or someone reaching out, want to collaborate with me. Like, those are the things that make me really excited, because that leads to something new. And I don't know what it's ever going to be. And that's the most exciting.
Right. So out of the products that you've made, I think that I have done reviews on like 90% of them.
Yep.
And you guys can check out some of his products that I have reviewed in the SPM blog. And they're always posted in the magazine as well. So when he comes out with something new, I will get a hold of one and then do a product review on it and publish it in the blog and then in the magazine. So anybody who's looking to check that out, take a look at the SPM magazine. And there's also going to be your website posted here at the bottom when this is published. And it'll be able to show where people can go to order your stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's about all the questions I have for you, Calvin. I think that this is, a decent place to start with. And we'd love to have you back on the show one time. Sometime.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it
So
was
that's
very
all
fun. Thank you very much.
Yeah, not a problem. We'll get this shared. All right.
Yep.
All right. You have a good one and we'll talk soon. All right.
All righty. See you guys. Thank
All
you
right.
so much,
Yep.
Captain.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.